I guess that would allow us to convene the meeting
Yes, sir.
at whatever time that your watch shows. We can document that. And I think we're going to roll with the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Could you do the roll call for us, Warren?
Absolutely. Members of the board, please respond as I call your name verbally. Mr. Ahrens? Mr. Brown?
Present.
Thank you, sir. Good morning. Mr. Coyne? Ms. DeVore?
Present.
Thank you, ma'am. Good morning. Mr. Easley, I have noted you present. Mr. Harvey?
Good morning, and I am present.
Thank you, Mr. Harvey. Good morning. Mr. Hoops? Ms. Johnson? Mr. Kenyon?
I am here and battling with the mute button.
Thank you, Chuck. Good morning. Mr. Kinsler? Mr. Klein?
Good morning, I'm present.
Thank you. Good morning. Mr. Law? I know Mark was in there. Mark, will come back to you. Miss Moore?
Present.
Thank you, ma'am. Miss Thayer?
Present.
Thank you, ma'am. Miss Tomasi?
Here.
Thank you, ma'am. Good morning. Mr. Law?
Good morning.
Well, we will try to establish for sure that Mr. Law, so we can see it. He's there, but
be experiencing a double mute situation there.
we'll note you as present for now, Mark, and we'll catch up. Mr. Co-Chair, that does constitute a quorum.
Okay, thank you, Warren. Thank you, everybody, for joining us for the special meeting. We are here to talk about our business relief program update and talk about grantee audits. Pretty excited about this topic, and I've been looking forward to it, Josh. So we'll turn it over to you to carry it from here.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair and members of the board and folks from the public. Thanks for joining in today to learn a little bit about the programs that we have that we're undertaking, as well as an audit that will be forthcoming. And I wanted to give a little bit of information on that. So I've got a presentation to share. So I will share my screen. Just to give a little bit of background on the funds that are going on right now, as well as the previous ones. Just a real quick recap on the Interruption Fund, the Relief Fund, and the Mitigation Fund. All of those are now closed, as you can see from the numbers here. In the Interruption Fund, which closed on July 2nd, almost 4,000 applicants were paid. Nearly $100 million was paid out. The Relief Fund and the Mitigation Fund both ended on September 15th. The Relief Fund had 2,400 or so applicants for a total of $177.7 million. And then the Mitigation Fund had 687 applicants, paid a total of a little over $25 million. All of those funds were part of the original legislation that allotted $325 million to the Business Council. I'm sure you can all remember the details of all of those, but those were really intended to get out there, make sure that we were helping businesses do their best to deal with the losses from COVID, as well as mitigate any health and safety for their customers and their employees. And I think we've done a good job of getting that money in the hands of the folks that need it most. The next two funds that we have going on right now for the next week are the Agriculture Fund, which is a $90 million program set forth by the governor to help those ranchers and farmers, producers who have lost revenue due to COVID. That's going to be open until November 18th, about $250,000 per applicant there. And then the Endurance Fund, which is utilizing the remainder of that $325 million that we had and that had not been spent, that is open as well to November 18th. And that is also $250,000 per applicant maximum grant award. Those funds are in process now. Our team is working through the applications and working on ensuring that those folks are eligible, that they have the right documentation that is required at this point, and moving those through the process as we speak. We're hoping and we're hopeful that the Endurance Fund will get some more funding depending on how that all shakes out. But as of right now, there is a little under $24 million available. Now I want to kind of jump in and talk a lot more specifically about the auditing programs that have been going on since day one. And what I'd like to coin this is sort of balancing speed and integrity. As I'm sure many of you will recall, if you can remember back that far, it seems like it's been a long time, but back in the late May, early June timeframe, there was a lot of discussion about getting these funds in the hands of businesses to keep them solvent, to help them through a really challenging time, and to ensure that they had some resilience. And there was a lot of focus on speed at that time, but even at that point, we realized very quickly that we didn't want to just put that money out there without ensuring the integrity and making sure that the businesses that we were sending them to were eligible. And we focused a lot on that eligibility portion with our process. And I'm going to take this from a really high level view. Once an application comes into the Business Council through our computerized system, we do what's called a semi-automatic review. Now that semi-automatic review has a number of steps in it. One of those is to double check to ensure that they are allowed to have federal funds, that there's no debarment for that company or entity that would preclude them from getting federal funds. We double check that is indeed the case. We check that they are that they have a Wyoming address and that they are a Wyoming entity. We do a number of, depending on the company type, we do a number of checks with boards and other state data sources to ensure that they really are registered and listed in the state and that they are an eligible company. We do checks for those individuals with social security numbers as well as EINs. And there are 8 different checkpoints that they go through in the semi-automatic review. One thing I do want to mention is that we are concerned about fraud to a level that we don't want to share the individual examples of what these are, because sometimes people look closely at these as a way to find out, well, how can I get around this system? And so we have worked very closely with the Auditor's Office, the Secretary of State's office, the Attorney General's office, and a number of other organizations within the state to ensure that the right people, at least their eligibility for these programs, is solid. Now, with that, there are always questions that come out of that. And what we do next is what's called a manual review. And in those cases, we dig down and ask for more information. And this really is a manual process. We reach out to the applicant, receive that information back into our computer program. We do a financial desk audit. We have even done checks of addresses and things like that by essentially driving by or visiting the addresses to ensure that these are truly legitimate businesses. And then, of course, we have the Secretary of State, and in the case of the agriculture funds, we've employed folks from the Department of Agriculture to ensure that that these are entities that are legitimate and can take these funds in Wyoming. This process takes a number of days in some cases to do, upwards of 21 days to do this and to do it correctly. And so we take it very seriously. Before we pass that on to our final quality control, the final approval step, as well as working with the state auditor's office to set them up as a vendor, even though that's spelled incorrectly, I apologize for that. And they do a final check for IRS verification and ensure that they are able to receive these funds as well. And so a number of things have to happen in order to take these funds and get them out there. Now, if there are any questions on this portion, I'd be happy to talk through them. But again, I may not be able to get into the exact specifics just to ensure the integrity of this process.
Any questions for Josh?
This is yes, please. This is Kathy. I just have a couple questions. And this has to do with the endurance and the ag funds that are being distributed or being applied for right now. How are they going? Are they coming in as quickly as the other funds had come in? And do you feel like there's an evening out on the endurance funds? And that's the questions I have. Thanks.
Good questions. And Kathy, I'm actually going to have either Amy Grenfell or Marcio Paez Barreto answer this question, and they have the exact specifics on those two funds. Amy?
Hi, Kathy, members of the board. Great to see you all. Yes, so we saw obviously our largest intake day was on the first day of the program that it opened up. Since then, we're averaging, we've seen it go down from about 200 applications to a day, and we're a little under 200 a day right now.
Thank you, Amy. Did that answer your question, Ms. Tomasi?
Yes, it did. Thank you.
Yep, you bet. All right. You know, if I can share a bit of a metaphor here, I'll kind of walk through this with this metaphor in mind. We've all heard the old saying that it takes one apple to spoil the whole barrel, or a rotten apple can spoil the barrel. And depending on how we want to use that, I think this is actually a really good metaphor for this particular process. And the way I'll look at it is this: if you walked up and looked at a bushel or barrel of apples, you might be able to easily see those that were rotten and pick them out. And that's what we're doing at this step. At this step, we're looking at those that from the outside looking in, they do not fit, and we're removing those. And in fact, we're removing about 6% of the applications have been pitched out at this point. So that has been a really good process to ensure the integrity that from the outside, that apple looks good, okay? And that's the way we look at this. And we wanted to make sure that now that 6% can represent millions of dollars that could have gone to those entities that are not legitimate based on all of those checks. And so we're really happy to say that we didn't just focus on speed, we really did focus on speed and integrity with this. And that 6%, I think, is a really good number there. But we also know that once you've removed everything from the outside looking in, you still have to take a bite of some of those apples to see if there are worms inside. Because sometimes an apple looks good from the outside, but it may not be. And so that's really what this next step is. And this is the post-grant awardee audit. And that's really the focus of today's board meeting, because we're going to be talking with Wayne Herr from MHP, who will be doing our audit in a bit, hopefully with your consideration. And we're going to talk about what we need to do now after the fact that some of these folks have received grants. And we're going to take a look and ensure that indeed there's not a worm inside that apple, that it really is a good apple. And I think that with this process that we're undertaking, we're going to find those, and we're going to ensure the integrity of this. Now, the first thing that we're putting out there, and it's actually live already, is a business relief program tip site where people can anonymously give us information about businesses or entities that may not qualify or that should not have received these funds. And this is important because we have received some information from folks in the local communities. And again, this goes back to, from the outside looking in, these grants might make sense, but those folks in the communities know the businesses. They understand the businesses, or at least have a better feel for them, so they can provide information that may be useful. This anonymous tip site will allow, again, those folks will be anonymous. They'll be able to provide us some information about the businesses so that we can dig in further. And of course, our process is going to remain the same for those businesses. We're going to request supporting documentation as well from those that we receive tips on, but also from a number of other businesses in the review process. We'll request and get that supporting information so that we can begin the review. We're also going to provide a safe harbor for those businesses that feel like, hey, maybe I didn't fully understand the calculation and I did the calculation incorrectly. I want to send the money back. And that is happening. We have already received over $500,000 of funds returned based on people saying, look, I didn't fully understand the calculation. I want to return this. I want to make sure that I'm doing the right thing. And so they have returned that. And we want to provide that safe harbor. It's a best practice. It was utilized by SBA, the Small Business Administration, in all of their programs this year as well. I think it's a very good thing. Those funds that are recovered will be able to be utilized in our programs so that we can make sure that the grant needs from those legitimate businesses can be taken care of. Now, our focus today is really on that third-party audit and how to do that. And again, to do that, we felt like it would be appropriate to get with the experts and make sure that we are doing that in a way that an auditor can utilize their expertise and their resources to do so. We are looking, and you are considering an agreement with the folks at MHP to do that audit. But we also have reached out to and are working closely with the Secretary of State's office, as well as the Department of Audit, who will be aiding in this because they have some special expertise and they have done many of these. And in fact, in some of these have already hit their desks for audit. And so we want to utilize those resources because, one, we want to ensure the integrity of this program, but two, we also know that time is tight and we want to be able to do this in a way that again shows the federal government and our taxpayers around the state that this money is being handled in the appropriate way. Now, once we get that information back, we will work with other agencies to understand what the next steps are. And that's an important component of this. Once we have the findings, we can understand what steps will need to be taken, what steps can be taken, and then we'll take those at that time. And so that is really that post-grant award process. And I think one of the things that while we're not necessarily, I don't want to say excited to undertake this, we are eager to ensure the integrity of this program and really show that it isn't necessarily that a few rotten apples spoil the bunch. And I want us to I kind of want to remind everyone that these programs have done a lot of good. What the legislature and the governor have put forth and that we have all worked hard to enact this year has done a lot of good for the state of Wyoming. We have done for each community, if you look across the communities, the amount of funding is very, very even. In terms of per capita, we have a number of businesses that have reached out, a number of folks that have said, without this, we would have been sunk, and we appreciate that. And I just want us to remember when we kind of look at these numbers and we look at the graphics that sort of indicate that this is a person and some money and things like that, we kind of lose sight of the fact that really, frankly, there are people behind these. There are people in our communities that needed this money and that will be able to keep their businesses solvent and hopefully build some resilience in the coming months because of what we've all done. And I just want us to realize that while we're focusing on the audit and we're focusing on ensuring the integrity of this program has done a ton of good and will continue to do so in the coming months, I believe. So with that, I'll stand for any questions and hopefully be able to answer those. Thank you.
Okay, any questions for Josh or comments?
Oh, I got myself off of Mr. Co-Chair.
Yeah, go ahead, Kim.
I just want to take a couple minutes to, number one, thank you guys, Josh, for, of course, all the stats you just put up there and the sheer volume of applications you've taken. You guys, I come from, you all know, I have the nerdiest background. Oh, except for maybe Wayne. Wayne potentially is nerdier than me. But as a banker, I mean, we live in the world of audit. We live in the world of audit every day. And I appreciate what a good job the Business Council has done. And I hope the general public understands exactly what you said in the beginning, Josh. Speed. The speed of delivery was really key in helping the businesses across our state. And speed does not always equal perfection. And if anyone out there had an expectation of absolute perfection with no fraud, I'm just going to be honest, that's an unrealistic expectation. As a banker, we do this every day, day in and day out, and it's all we do. We look at applications, we look for fraud, we audit through, and even though we do it full time every day, we still don't catch it all. It's literally impossible. But what's most important and what the public and the state needs to understand is that it's important to us at the staff level. It's important enough to engage an auditor. And the expectation is to identify every opportunity that we can to eliminate that fraud. But in the grand scheme, there is no physical way that the Business Council could have processed. I mean, I was adding up the applications between what you put up there and what is actually in this endurance fund right now and the ag fund. We're talking 9,500 applications. If anyone had an expectation of zero fraud, that's impossible. As a banker, you know, a bank that cranks it out and does this all the time, we may do what, 400 a year? 9,500 applications. That's amazing. So I commend you guys for following through on the backside with the audit function. That's what it's there for. I am most proud of the speed that you built the program and delivered it, because speed was of the essence for the businesses in the state.
Okay. Thanks, Kim. Any other comments, questions for Josh or staff? Josh, I have one, just a kind of a brief question. I like the idea of sort of the safe harbor piece. If there are funds that do get returned that were, you know, errantly received, or however that works, or people's changed their mind, or do we still have time to redeploy those funds, or will those potentially end up going back to their source?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. Really, really great question. And it is our intent to redeploy those funds. We are hopeful that the way we've laid the process out and the time frame in which we can do it, that we will be able to. However, we don't really know. We are, again, we've kind of looked out there and said, if the timing is right and we can do this process the way we've intended, we believe we can. But you know, the devil's in the details, and what we're finding with all of these programs is that the way you lay things out doesn't always match up with reality. So we're very hopeful that it can.
Yep. Okay, thanks, Josh. And any other questions from the group? Okay. would that position us to talk about the contract at all, Josh?
Yes, it would, and I believe Warren has probably the latest version of that agreement, and I believe all of you have had a draft of that on Wednesday to review. And so I believe that now would be the time to consider that and provide discussion around that.
Okay. So I guess at this point, we would, in order to get the agreement on the table, would entertain a motion and a second for approval of the agreement. The draft that we have, what significant changes have been made to that? I guess let's do that before we look for a motion. Any significant changes, Josh?
No, in terms of material changes, there have not slight changes in the scope of work after working with Wayne at MHP. And I believe that we do have Miss Brandy Monger on the phone to discuss any potential changes that have happened from the Attorney General side.
Okay. Is the board comfortable in getting a motion in a second to put this on the table for discussion?
This is Chuck. I would move to put the contract on the table for discussion.
And I'll second.
Motion and a second. Okay. So with that, then let's, I think it would be good to maybe go over what's been changed. Josh would probably be helpful.
Yeah, you bet. Excuse me. Warren, would you mind posting that to the sharing your screen with that if possible? And Warren, perhaps you and I can both walk through any of the minor changes that may have happened in that time.
Absolutely. So, Mr. Co-Chair, members of the board, the contract that you're looking at is based on the standard Attorney General Professional Services template, and incorporates a number of the federal funds provisions that are required in there. The contract is for an amount not to exceed $1 million. It does enable MHP to go to work immediately. We will work with MHP to develop the sampling method, get those things out. The ultimate scope of work is an audit of the council's assertion that awardee data from the selected awardees supports key amounts used in the calculations of the grant awards. So basically, when they entered information, when an applicant entered information into our application, do they have documents to substantiate the amounts they entered, as merely the test that we're looking to provide. The Business Council is going to provide material support outreach to include public meetings, webinars, some other information. We're going to create the mechanism by which those funds can be returned in a seamless way and allow MHP's staff access to our system. Of particular note with this contract, it does provide for MHP the ability to use subcontractors given the time and the volume that we anticipate that they are going to be taking these on. They have advised us that it will be necessary to use subcontractors. This provides the coverages for that. We have it reviewed through the AG at a preliminary level. It is not yet fully approved as to form. It has been reviewed and vetted also by risk management from an insurance standpoint. So we feel we're in a very good place with this contract, subject to whatever minor feedback we get in that final review and approval phase.
So Warren, I guess I'd be specifically interested in pointing out any changes that have been made from what was provided to the board, since that way we can specifically look at that. We can't really read what's on the screen, which is fine since we've all had the contract in hand, but could you specifically point out what has changed?
Absolutely. Sorry, Mr. Co-Chair. So looking at section 5C under the responsibilities of contractor, we have updated that language to more accurately reflect the specific scope of work and what tests we are asking MHP to perform under this audit. The other notable change that you will find here is the addition of this provision here, which is under the conflicts of interest. And basically it says if we select any current clients or customers of MHP, that they will notify us in writing and that they will send all of that testing to be performed by one of the subcontractors.
Okay.
Beyond that, sir, there are no material changes.
Okay, thank you, Warren. Do we have any, if you have any questions, please feel free. Board. Okay, hearing no questions, I would say all those in favor of approving the contract as presented, please say aye.
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 All those opposed, same sign. Okay, motion carries. You have your approval, Josh?
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair, and members of the board. Thank you not just for today and helping keep the integrity of this program, but also for your continued support in not just in these meetings, but in other conversations and ways to approach some of the challenges that we're facing. We sometimes say that we are a team of 36 people doing a lot of work, but that's not completely true. We've got a fantastic board of 15 who are helping us through this, and we definitely appreciate your time and energy with all of these. You've made a big difference for us. Thank you.
Hey, Josh.
Yes, sir.
Sorry about all my mute problems I had a bad cable, but I had a quick question. Is there a time window on this? Is there, I think, when I talk to, I guess some of the recipients and they understand there's going to be an audit process, I think it would be good for them to know if there's a start and a finish to this. So I just was curious about that.
Yeah, great question, Mark, and I can add a little bit of information to that. So as we were communicating this particular board meeting, as well as beginning the communications for those folks who will be in the audit pool, next week we will be providing more information via our newsletter and a press release, and we will be doing a webinar to answer questions and provide information on that. On the particulars of the audit program. That will include more dates on when things need to happen, how people will upload, how people will return funds, those kinds of the details that we know are really, really important to those folks. Our goal is to have all of we need to have all of this done by the end of the year. So it absolutely has to take place before 12/30. We know that the folks at MHP and their subcontractors are gearing up and going to be ready to go so that they can accomplish that task in just a few weeks. And so that will have to happen, really beginning probably the details of the audit and those desk audits and side-by-side comparisons will happen beginning at the beginning of December and run for a number of weeks to finish up before the end of December. Did that answer your question?
Thanks. And I got one more as I was fighting my mute earlier. When you were talking about recovery of funds, and I don't think you can really answer this, but in the event there are some funds recovered in 2021, I'm assuming that we really don't know the status of those funds.
I don't have the definitive answer for that yet, but we're working on that as well.
Okay.
Great
Thank
question.
you.
Yeah. Mr. Chairman, a question.
Go ahead.
Josh, what's our sampling rate on this? Everything's not going to get audited, right? There's just going to be a representative sample and then those that are questioned.
Yes, sir. There's a representative sample. So we're working with Wayne and utilizing his expertise in sample sizes of audits. We are essentially looking at the applications and somewhat scoring them, then taking a representative sample of those and we'll be doing those as well as those that that come in through the tip line. That's exactly correct.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, we cannot logistically handle that many audits, but also based on again Mr. Hurst's expertise on that is unnecessary for this type of an audit. So we'll use industry standard practices.
Okay, any other wrap-up questions? Okay, hearing none, I guess that completes our business for today. Would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I would move to adjourn.
Second.
We have a motion, a second to adjourn. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of adjournment, please say aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, meeting adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.